What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and we just keep climbing that mountain, baby. Welcome to week 6 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2024 CFL season and postseason, and we had the best week of our season to date back in week 5. Let's talk a little bit about it. 8-4 on the picks in week 5. It's a new personal best for this season, which is nice. We've gone from 7-5, 7-5. Now we're 8-4, definitely pushing in the right direction. 3-1 straight up, which now moves my mark to 13-7 on the season. I evened my against the spread record with a 3-1 mark in week 5 as well. That evens me out at 10-10. I was also even money on the totals, 2-2. So still a couple underwater there at 9-11 on the season, but 8-4 means I'm 32-28. We're back on the happy side of par, only going up from here. And when I say it was the best week of the season, it was the best week of the season. We look at CFL Fantasy, crushed it. A new personal best in 2024 of 166.3 in week 5 and really dominated that last game of last week. So that's a new personal best. I'm now 803rd, I was 803rd in week 5 across the whole game, which is my best single week mark. I was 127th in Derek Taylor's league, which is a personal best in that league so far this season. I am 564.1 for my total score on the season, which means across the whole game, I'm just inside the top 1,800, but that is a personal best, and just inside the top 300 in Derek Taylor's league. I had a long list of candidates to choose from for my most outstanding player on my fantasy team in week 5. I had 3 players who registered at least 30 fantasy points, but we're going to go with Justin McInnis there. A huge performance, 36.4. I think he went 10 catches for a buck, I want to say like a $1.44 and a pair of touchdowns, I think was what that was. But like I say, I had 3 players who got up over the 30-point plateau, and here's just how much I ate in that BC Hamilton game. I went into that game with 50 fantasy points. So the combination of Vernon Adams, Justin McInnis, and Shamar Bridges, who I had in my flex position, got me 116 points. Thanks, guys. Unfortunately, we will not have my CFL lineup in this video because the game has not unlocked the players yet. I'm recording this a little earlier on Tuesday morning. The game hasn't unlocked yet, so I don't have my roster there. I will have the roster for you. Maybe if it unlocks by the time I'm in the editing process, maybe the roster will be at the end of this. If not, it'll be in the pinned comment down below. So, our slate of games in week 6 has the Toronto Argos traveling to Montreal to take on the Alouettes. We got the Calgary Stampeders in Winnipeg taking on the Bombers. We've got Saskatchewan in BC to take on the Lions, and we've got the Ottawa REDBLACKS in Edmonton taking on the Elks coming off of their bye. Hamilton, mercifully, gets the bye this week. League-wide, home teams and favorites are now both trending at 65% straight up. So again, very strong marks for both of those. And specifically, home favorites are 8-2 straight up in 10 games this season. We were 3-1 to the over last week, and that evens that record across the season at 10-10 to the over. So no real edge, at least statistically, between the overs and the unders. Let's start with that presumptive Eastern final preview of Toronto and Montreal. You can't look at that Argos game last week as anything other than an absolute punt. So they held the Shea Patterson-led Saskatchewan Roughriders to 283 total yards. They only allowed them to gain 14 first downs, which sounds like a big number, but in the CFL, it's really not. There's a lot more possessions in a general CFL game. So to hold a team to only 14 first downs, that's a significant victory. And they only allowed the Riders to be 1 for 3 in the red zone. Still lost by only 7 points with 5 turnovers. My point that I want to make with this is change any single thing, adjust any single thing in the game, and you probably win that game. And for the Argos, it started at the quarterback position. Cameron Dukes absolutely cratering with 4 interceptions in that game, including a pick 6. He gets moved to the bench at the end of that game in favor of Nick Arbuckle, which if you've watched this show enough, probably enough said. He has just 405 scoreless passing yards in his last 2 games. And this is me editorializing from watching these games. To me, like over the last 2 games, he has felt flustered throwing against good secondaries. The first couple of weeks, like he got BC in week 1, and then I can't remember who they played now in week 3 coming out of the bye. Was it Edmonton? Might have been Edmonton. But now he's played back-to-back good secondaries and just doesn't look like the same player. To me, anyway. In Montreal, the Alouettes were forced to dig deep last week and build a comeback brick by brick from 14 points down to Calgary with under 20 minutes to play. Like, it was a sizable deficit that they had to dig themselves out of. And they did exactly that, man. They outgained the Stampeders 212-97 in a 15-0 fourth quarter run. They were massive in the fourth quarter to bring that game back and ultimately win it. Cody Fajardo, though, just 3 touchdowns to 3 interceptions over his last 2 games. But with Montreal, we know what it is. It's dominance by committee. It never has to be a single person, and it never necessarily has to be the same person twice. Walter Fletcher touched the ball 14 times in that game last week for 160 all-purpose yards, added in a rush touchdown. Tyson Philpott, 12 catches for $134 in the receiving game. 5 receivers had at least 4 catches in that game, and the run defense kind of struggled, but the secondary ate Jake Mayer alive, holding him to just 108 yards passing. They did allow a touchdown, but they also generated a pick. So even though this is the story of 2 teams going in opposite directions here, this is a tough pick. And the reason that it's a tough pick is, like, the Argos looked really bad. Like, they looked really bad in that game. But I firmly sit here believing the Alouettes should have got last week. And I'm not taking anything away from their comeback, because once again, brick by brick by brick, they had to build that thing. But they should have got. And they were got through 3 quarters. So this is not like a slam dunk pick here to take the Alouettes. I think there's rain coming in the forecast again. Whether or not that has any impact on the game, we'll see. Didn't really have much of an impact on the game last week, I don't think. I'm leaning the Alouettes in low-scoring games, which I kind of get the feeling that maybe this might be. But Montreal is one of those teams that is yet to have a bye week this season. Not only have they yet to have a bye week, their bye week is next week. So fatigue may be starting to come in, and you may get caught looking ahead. That's why I'm hesitant on this game. Ultimately, I am still going to lean on the Alouettes here because I do believe this is going to be a low-scoring game. Like, I think this number is way off when we get to the totals. Toronto is on the tail end of back-to-back road games as well, so let's take the Alouettes in Montreal to get the win over the Argos. Now, on the line, Montreal is favored by just under a touchdown. They're minus 6.5. I don't like that. When there's so many like fatigue things that are going against one side of the docket, I almost to lay a touchdown, to have to lay a touchdown, to have to cover a touchdown to win. I don't like that against the spread. I'm going to take the points here on the Argos, and I don't think that's going to be a super popular pick, but I really like that. I like this to be a very close, very competitive football game that Montreal ultimately wins. Maybe Toronto has to backdoor cover that number, but I do like the Argos with the points. Total in the game set at 51.5. This game reeks of a 40 to me all day long, so I love the under in this one. Under 51.5 in Montreal. Toronto, let's go like a 23-17. Something like that. So like it gets into the 40s. Argos maybe again backdoor cover that plus 6.5. I like the Alouettes to win. Give me the points on Toronto and give me the under. Let's go to Winnipeg now, where the Stamps are in town, and the Stamps were on the wrong side of that aforementioned Montreal comeback that we just talked about, despite, a relatively strong showing through 3 quarters as a whole team. They were at 251 total yards. They had 26 points on the board. They were +3 in the turnover battle. So, things were going well for Calgary. They were on pace there for, 300 some total yards, up into the 30 points, maybe generate another turnover there. Like, things were going well until they weren't. Tommy Stevens did get 2 rush touchdowns for the Stamps, and he paced them on the offensive side. And when I look at this Calgary team, I made a big deal out of talking about it last week. The Stamps defense that came in as the number 2 team league-wide in defensive efficiency. To have that showing in the fourth quarter is obviously very disappointing. And I'm sitting here left to wonder, like, Montreal very clearly has that next gear that these great teams have. They have the ability to go to that next gear and dig down and find something else, find something more. So was it the Montreal undeniability factor, or was it the fact that Calgary had no run game whatsoever in the fourth quarter? Like, absolutely none. I don't know what happened to Peyton Logan, but he basically did not play in the fourth quarter, or didn't touch the ball in the fourth quarter. So if I can't remember off the top of my head, if he was out there, he certainly didn't get the football, and other people were getting the football over him. So I can't remember if something happened to him. If I missed it on the broadcast, I'm not sure. In Winnipeg, Bombers off the schneid, baby. Finally, they build a 10-point halftime lead, and I want to say they cruised to their first win, but I mean, like, it's not like there wasn't moments that it could have been in doubt, but just to see them, like, dominate in the run game, absolutely, as a team, 37 carries for 212 and a touchdown, and Brady Oliveira back to being him, touching the ball 28 times, 166 all-purpose yards. Felt like a very Bombers game, didn't it? This was also another defensive efficiency gem for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, allowing only 16 points on 306 yards. It's good for a 19.1, which is a pretty elite numbers, with obviously weak quarterback play on the other side, in part forced by the Drew Brown injury and, like, Dustin Crum obviously not knowing that he was going to be playing in that game. It's a tough situation to come into. Chris Streveler had to do it the week before. The headline here is this: that was the most Bombers game of 2024. And if the Bombers have gotten that taste in their mouths again of, oh, that's how we play Bombers football, game on. And Zach Collaros could very well be back this week. This definitely feels like a revenge spot for Winnipeg off of that week 4 overtime loss, the game where Collaros got hurt, which was against Calgary. The defense is back to pushing for elite status yet again. I am at least somewhat hesitant because Winnipeg is another team that has not had a bye week yet this season. So they're going up against a team that, yes, it's back-to-back road games for Calgary, but they've had a bye, so they're a little more well-rested, and Winnipeg is still waiting for that and are going to have to keep waiting. But I don't think they're going to be subject to looking ahead, like maybe Montreal might be. So I really like the Bombers in this spot for sure. I feel like they've kind of turned a corner there with that game last week, and now they might just be off to the races. Give me the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home to get the win over Calgary. On the line, Winnipeg is laying minus 4.5 points. Like, I think this is going to be a close game. I don't think it's necessarily that close. I do think it's a 2-possession game. So I'm going to lay the minus 4.5 here on Winnipeg. It's more than a field goal, but it's not like they're asking me for a touchdown. So minus 4.5, I'm okay with that. Total in the game set at 47.5 points. These two teams are combined, I think, 2-7 to the over this season, and Winnipeg has not hit an over yet this year at all. Winnipeg Blue Bombers defensive football. Give me the under on the points. So let's go Winnipeg 27, Calgary 16. Winnipeg wins. They cover the minus 4.5 and give me the under on the 47.5 point total. Riders and Lions are up next, and in Riderland, they make the most of 5 Toronto turnovers in that game against the Argos, and Shea Patterson managed that game for his first win as a starting quarterback. He completed 65% of his passes, only put up 192 yards through the air, had a touchdown, did not have an interception, added a touchdown and 18 yards on 4 carries. That's the definition of a game manager to me, baby. He went out and he did it. Again, all credit to him. I still have my reservations, but all credit to him. And the reason that I have my reservations is that's not the kind of offensive performance that's going to win most football games in the CFL. They only had 283 all-purpose yards on offense. They only gained, remember how I said only 14 first downs? They only got 3 of those through the air. So, like, they got a bunch in the run game, like short yardage run game, and that's great. But to only generate 3 first downs passing the football, that's not going to work most of the time. And there's a number of other things in there that's not going to work most of the time. But the Riders defense keeps finding ways this season to get things done. There's a number 3 total defense in the CFL, and this is an elite run defense, allowing fewer than 50 yards per game on the ground. You try to run on the Riders, they're going to make you pay for it. We'll go to BC's side of things now, and I'm just going to give you a little CFL alliteration here. The Lions hammer hapless Hamilton helplessly. I mean, the Ticats had nothing for the Lions in that game. They really, really didn't. It was 34-11 at halftime. That's ball game. Vernon Adams, 398 all-purpose yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Like I mentioned, Justin McInnis caught 10 balls for 144 yards and 2 tuds. William Stanback only continues to ascend. Feels like every game for Stanback has been a better game than the one that came before it. So he had 19 touches, 156 all-purpose yards, and the ever-elusive rush and receiving touchdown. It wasn't a flashy defensive performance for the Lions, but they were where they needed to be to make the plays when they needed them the most, right? So, and again, you're up against Hamilton. It's not exactly the most potent offense, although James Butler, I think, caught 10 balls in that game, so he was an absolute menace in the receiving game. But Hamilton was held to under 50% on second and third downs. So again, the critical downs, the plays were made when they needed to be, and that included a turnover on downs. They were also held to just 2 for 4 in the red zone. Yeah, they had to play last week, but they didn't exactly face a lot of pushback last week. You know what I mean? They walked into that game knowing it was very winnable, and that's exactly what it was. And I'm talking about the Lions here. They didn't exactly have to fight for it. Once again, I'm still not convinced by Shea Patterson, but I am very convinced by that Riders defense. Can that defense steal 2 straight games? The Lions are another team that has not had a bye week yet this season. Saskatchewan has. Saskatchewan played at home last week, so it's not like they're playing back-to-back road games. Give me the upset here. I will take the Riders in BC to get the win over the Lions. Now, on the line, BC's laying 7.5 points as a very large home favorite. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be a very large home favorite. I'm just saying there's reasons to believe, going into that game last week, there's reason to believe that the BC Lions on both sides of the ball are not necessarily the team that we believe them to be. They were that team last week against that opponent. Significant step up in opposition this week for the Lions. That number stunk to me the second I saw it. So I knew I wasn't laying those points, and I'm like, do I even love BC to win this game? Not necessarily. The Riders are unbeaten for a reason, and they're unbeaten against the spread. I think I'm incentivized to grab the upset here. Let's take the Riders to win, and obviously to cover the plus 7.5 points. Total in the game here set at 52.5. I do believe this game goes over. I think we see a better game out of Shea Patterson. This is his prove it game for me personally, as if he needs to prove anything to me directly, but I think this is the game where he does it. I think this is the Brett Lauther game. I could see 4-5 field goals from Brett Lauther in this one. Give me a 30-27 final. Sasky wins. Sasky covers the plus 7.5 and give me over on the 52.5 points. And the last game we're going to look at is the Ottawa REDBLACKS on the road in Edmonton taking on the Elks. So the REDBLACKS obviously lose that aforementioned rematch with Winnipeg that we just talked about by a final score of 25-16. Drew Brown removed from that game by the concussion spotters after starting only 2 for 6 in the passing game. Dustin Crum comes in. He only puts up 102 scoreless passing yards. He did throw an interception. He did add 55 yards on 8 carries, but there's no quarterback controversy here yet. I mean, it's tough to play a game where you turn the ball over 3 times and still win. I mean, Montreal did it, but the defense gave them a chance for the REDBLACKS. Ottawa still had a chance to win that football game. The defense forced 6 field goals out of Winnipeg, sub 50% on second down also were the Bombers. So they had a chance there, and they had a big chance also because of the run game. Raquel Armstead, now like low-key the second leading rusher in the CFL. He got 100 yards yesterday, or in the game last week rather, and he's the only rusher in the top 8 in CFL rushing that's above 5 yards a carry. Elks come into this game very well rested coming off the bye. They're at 0-4, but as we know, not all losses are created equally. Not every 0-4 is the same. Yes, Edmonton is 0-4. They've lost those 4 games by a combined 15 points. Less than 4 points on average. And here's how it was. 3, 3, 3, and 6. They've lost 3 straight games by exactly 3 points. That's a play here, a play there. All of them one-possession games. Edmonton has been in every single one of these games regardless of opponent. Riders, Alouettes, Argos, Lions. That's been the start of Edmonton's season. All 4 of those teams are good. All 4 of those teams could win the Grey Cup, and it doesn't sound weird. All 4 of them quality opponents, and Edmonton hung with every single one of them if the defense was a little bit better. These are all winnable games, winnable situations, right down to the wire. I have an official proclamation. I am no longer blaming the offensive line for the run game. Have they been great? No. But it ain't the O-line's fault. It's the play calling. It's what I kind of believed it to be before, but I was like, well, the O-line's not playing that great. No, it's the play calling. It's not on the O-line anymore. Kevin Brown is running the ball 8 times per game. What are you doing? It's embarrassing. The 13% of his runs this year have gone for 10 yards or more. It's not the highest in the CFL, but it's up there. Like, Kadeem Carey's only at, like, I think 16%. So, like, he's an explosive runner. Why is he not getting the ball? It doesn't make any sense. Unless the guy's hurt. But he keeps playing. So he must not be hurt. So it just comes down to the play calling. The Elks have more yards per carry in the run game this year. And this is without Trey Ford. Trey Ford ain't playing. Ain't starting anyway. The Elks have more yards per carry than Montreal, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And they have the same yards per carry as BC. Most people would look at all 4 of those teams and say those are better run offenses. So at that point, it comes down to opportunity. It's the play calling. That has to change. I hope Chris Jones is watching this episode right now. Hi, Chris. That needs to change. Presumably, somebody's got to win this game. You know, obviously neither one of these teams are lighting the league on fire, but presumably somebody's got to win this game. This is a significant step down in competition for the Edmonton Elks, given what they've already played this season, and we just went over it. Add in the big rest advantage. Big rest advantage. Edmonton coming off their bye, Ottawa on the tail end of back-to-back road games. Significant rest advantage. Unleash Kevin Brown. I think that's what's going to happen in this game. Give me the Edmonton Elks to win this game at home, outright, beat the Ottawa REDBLACKS. On the line, Edmonton's laying minus 3.5 points. A lot of books have this at minus 3. I feel better at minus 3, but if they're going to cover minus 3, they're going to cover minus 3.5. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and lay those points. It's a little because you got to buy the extra hook, but let's lay the minus 3.5 here on Edmonton. I think they're objectively the better team. Total in this game set at 49.5 points. I think we see a lot of running in this game on both sides here, Kevin Brown and Raquel Armstead. Give me an under in this. I think a sneaky under. I think it's a pretty good number at 49.5, but I'm going to stay under on it and go like 26-20, something like that. Elks win. Elks cover the minus 3.5 and the under on the points. There you go, folks. Once again, no fantasy team to give you, at least on video, because they haven't unlocked the game yet. But here are my picks, once again, for week 6 in the CFL. I got the Montreal Alouettes beating the Toronto Argonauts 23-17 in Montreal, taking the plus 6.5 on Toronto in a game that stays under 51.5 points. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beating the Calgary Stampeders in Winnipeg 27-16, laying the minus 4.5 on Winnipeg in a game that stays under 47.5. I got the Saskatchewan Roughriders upsetting the BC Lions in BC by the score of 30-27. Give me the plus 7.5 on Saskatchewan and over the 52.5 point total. And I got the Edmonton Elks at home beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS 26-20. Edmonton covers the minus 3.5 against the spread and give me the under on the 49.5 point total. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Enjoy the games in week 6. Once again, sorry for no fantasy roster in this episode, but it'll either be maybe right at the tail end here if they've unlocked the game, or it'll be in the pinned comment down below. Enjoy the games. We'll see you next week.